Philip Drexler from Austin, Texas.
Okay. All right. Hello, Phil.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Al?
Yes, we can. We're good. How are you?
Good. I got away from no resource I was at.
Great.
Excellent.
Great.
All right. Well, I wanted to talk about Robert Frost and his walls. I'm wondering from whoever wants to comment on this, if they don't see in the philosophy that is expressed in Mr. Frost's poems a lot of what produced the very ugly, nasty, and divisive passion play that we had to endure the last couple of weeks with regard to the Supreme Court
Yes.
nomination.
I see where you're going.
As I still do, there seemed to be a lot of walls that got thrown up there
Yeah.
and thought they were justifiably being thrown up by various parties.
Right. That's perfect.
So that's my question.
Phil, that is a really great question. I'm really glad you asked it because we haven't really talked about, God, the phrase current events doesn't do justice to what we're going through, but to immediate political questions. And I think Frost's Wall is very problematic. So thank you for the question, and thanks for being a ModPost citizen, and I hope things are good down there in Austin. You must be getting a little of that rain, I imagine.
Yeah, no too much. Time for it to stop.
All right.
We're okay.
All right, well, hang in there, Phil. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Al.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to start, and then anybody else who wants to chime in on the wall, and Leah, you may or may not have that text in front of you, so I don't know if you're ready to deal with it. But
I was just wondering, could you rephrase the question? Because I had
I'll be happy.
Yeah,
I'll be
thank
happy
you.
to. I'm going to take some liberties with the way Phil asked it. What is it about Frost's stance, seeming, or at least the speaker's stance about the wall, that can help us have a conversation about current politics? And when I think of the wall, Lily, I think more of questions about immigration and tolerance and property. A little less about the Kavanaugh stuff, except that the Kavanaugh stuff leads to these issues.
Here's the phrase that might help us. But I mean, sorry, I'm not looking at the text, so I'm going to paraphrase it from my memory. There's a section that's something like, if I was going to be making a wall, I would like to know what I was walling in and walling out. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that resonated with this idea that like accusers of powerful men, like we should hang on because like this sets a dangerous precedent. Almost this idea of like, I don't agree with this, but this is like a popular idea, is like we should know what we're walling in and walling out. Like we should, this false sense of egalitarianism maybe, like that building a wall. Frost doesn't seem to be equal to his neighbor in this poem, but they're both equivalently on the side of a wall. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, this idea that like just because you build a wall doesn't mean that you've equitably like set a boundary or divided something. Like we don't have to be that careful about what we're walling in and walling out from that perspective.
Yeah, I think Frost's speaker is trying to, he thinks of himself as more conscious, more aware, more conscious than the guy on the other side of the wall.
Yeah, it sounds like to me like a more moneyed like Republican person in power saying to a subject like, you know, what's next? Like something bad, worse than this,
well,
whatever.
In the end,
whatever,
the speaker, and forgive me for applying partisan terms to this, but the speaker of the poem is like as you were hinting at, a more genteel Republican saying, well, I'm not sure I'm in favor of the wall, but it's the custom we do. It's always what we've done. So let's build the wall. And the person on the other side is the guy who never goes behind his father's saying. So is the uneducated country bumpkin version of the same, and they both have this unholy alliance about how we need to keep the wall up. And in the end, the wall stays up, even though the speaker seems to be hipper and more conscious of the problems of the wall, like we don't even know why we're putting this wall up, but I still think we should put the wall up. And he forms this awful relationship with this neighbor who says, yeah, let's do the wall. I don't think about it, but let's do the wall. And then the wall stays up. And what Frost feels about this is not entirely clear, but these two characters do maintain the wall, and it sure is beautiful. Leah, what do you think?
I was thinking this isn't about Frost's poem, but more about the notion of wall as a whole throughout the poems that we have been studying. I feel like there are walls as well in Dinner Guest Me and in Boy Breaking Glass. And it's interesting to see how these walls are treated in a way. This had me thinking about the idea of symbolical violence, because walls are also all about who's inside, who's kept out. And in Dinner Guest Me, I feel like the fact that everything is in this dinner is very polite, very gentle, does not mean that there isn't a lot of symbolical violence going on here, precisely because everything is very polite and gentle and they're eating very fancy food. But in a way, the speaker is left out of this. And this is a wall that he knows that he cannot break if he wants to stay in the room. There's this kind of ambiguity, if you see what I mean. It's
we
a paradox.
Definitely see what you mean. That's really good. That was really good. I'd like to invite some more responses to this issue. I think we have Erica, Jason, and Dave. Erica, do you have a thought about mending wall in relation to current topics, current politics?
I do. Reading the poem this time around, I kind of feel like you can't help but think about that. There's that moment in the poem where the speaker says, if I could put a notion in his head, why do they make good neighbors, etc. What I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense, like that just sort of makes me think about the ways that walls exclude and the potential for language to work as a wall. And then there's also something, like it feels as though the speaker of the poem is talking down to his neighbor.
Definitely.
And by the end of the poem, the speaker is kind of judging his neighbor for, not getting with the times, for kind of relying on his father's saying.
And yet, they build the wall. And yet they build the wall.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not really clear, Erica, if the poem is ironizing good fences make good neighbors. Yeah. Everybody who first reads the poem thinks, oh, Frost is really satirizing good fences make good neighbors, except the poem is itself kind of a wall. The poem formally, with all that iambic, that inexorable iambic, seems to be building a traditional poetic wall. It's really hard to get across. And so good fences do make good neighbors. And actually, I think everybody sitting around here, I imagine everybody thinks that that's wrong. That is not the right approach to intersubjectivity. Good fences do not make good neighbors. It's wrong. Sorry, Erica.
No, that's okay. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. And I also think that the way that the poem is crafted, the way that Frost is using both form and language and dialogue between the speaker and the neighbor, is working as building walls within the poem.
Yeah. I really want to hear more on this, if everybody promises to be really brief. Anna, do you have a quick thought on this? And I think Jamie might. You do, okay.
Private property is theft.
That was a quick one. And Frost is saying the opposite.
Yes.
Really. I mean, so Frost is in this section because he was thought of as a modernist, but he actually turns out to be an anti-modernist, and he cleverly states the conservative position on subjectivity. He thinks there's a subject and an object, and the reader is the object, and we're very much like the guy on the other side of the wall. And a poem is a wall. And Frost says, modern free verse is like playing tennis without a net. Free verse is like writing a poem where there's no wall. Yes, we say, or I say, yes, take down that wall, Mr. Frost. Sorry, I got a little enthusiastic. Jamie, quickly response to this?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I just sort of saw in connection to the current Kavanaugh stuff, the wall is this sort of abstraction of the patricians maintaining their position in society in a way of keeping out access for those that aren't, like, don't come from top 10 schools, are in fraternities, and aren't male. And I sort of see his language as mirroring that paternalistic, I don't know, phallocentric idea.
Yeah, very cool.
Very brief.
That was really good. I also want to say something, and then Anna's going to quote Shirley Collins. I think we all ought to be reminded that we are, when we all agree on this kind of thing, all the cool Modpo people, we are at risk of building a wall so that someone who interprets the poem differently feels like, wait a minute, I'm on the other side of this wall. What are you doing to me? So I really think we need to, if we're going to be partisan, and I think we're being partisan right now, we need to just be, it's obvious that we're partisan, but we need to be really straightforward about it, and we need to hear other points of view. I just want to remind myself, stop being an asshole about the toad in the wall, and listen. So you want to quote Shirley?
Yeah, Shirley says in 2 quick posts, mending walls is an opportunity for neighbors to socialize. And also, remember, those New England walls are not that tall. They mark boundaries rather than close off people or views.
Yes. That's totally right.
Yeah,
and
totally
also,
true.
this is just as the boy breaking glass is Brooks's point of view about art, and Frost would not like that as art. But they can have an argument about what's art. And Frost is saying that every year I meet my neighbor and we build the wall, and that is what passes for art, because that's what we do. We build wall building, masonry. It's using round stones. It's an art. It's a craft. And it is what means art in the poem. Amber Rose, what do you think of all this wall stuff? You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but...
I guess I agree with you, Al, that walls are not good things. But I am trying to think about how I could make this productive, and I'm hesitant to do that because I don't like to be like, it's not to be like devil's advocate, but I don't know. I'm going to just say what I want to say. So what I do think is helpful, if I were to totally take this out of the political context in which I think he was writing the poem, that when it says, like, you know, we go for a walk and we keep the wall between us or whatever, that I think that there is something about opacity that is useful. Like, I think about the poet Edward Glissant and him writing about opacity, and that we have to have the right to opacity. So recognizing that we are intersubjective, but that doesn't mean that we can assume that we can be fully transparent to one another, and that we have to respect some kind of opacity. But I think opacity is different than a wall, right? Because I think that there's something about a wall that feels like I'm putting this wall here actually because I don't respect you enough to think that if the wall wasn't there, we could both have our space. So I'm going to use this material thing to enforce that kind of respect. So I do think that there's a slight difference there, but I don't know. I guess I wanted to bring in opacity as something that is useful and necessary when thinking about how to be productive in intersubjective conversation.
Yeah, that's really well said. And it gets us back to poetic form. I mean, there is such a thing as opacity that creates a wall that can be very productive. It creates a barrier that you have to try to get over in order to understand. You have to do work. Dickinson builds walls. The House of Possibility, with all those windows, it's still a wall. But I keep thinking that Frost is going about it in a way that I don't find congenial.
And I agree
know
with
that you were saying that.
Yeah.
To me, I call it inexorable iambic. The iambic is so in your face. It is so performed. It is so perfect. It is so Shakespearean. It is so impossibly what it is that you have no room. It's a wall. Those 5 feet I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. Think about the I ams there. They're inescapable. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. You feel like you have no way in.
Yeah.
It is done. He's that good at the iambic, and the wall has been built, and all we can do is kind of do more iambics. Iambic pentameter, which is, you know, the great English literary history. It's really tough to enter that conversation. And no wonder the guy on the other side of the wall doesn't know what to do.